Okay, quick. Try to think about how many cups of coffee you've had in the past month. Got it? Okay. Next, think about how many electronic devices you've purchased in the past year. Okay, so most people would answer the first question about the cups of coffee by trying to tally up all of the coffees that they've had over the period we ask about, so in this case, the past month. Typically, when questions are asked this way, people report smaller numbers than what's actually true. The reason for this is that they likely forget about some of the incidences. So in our example, you've probably forgotten about some of the cups of coffee that you've had over the past month. This means that if you ask questions like this on surveys, the estimates that you get are going to be a bit lower than the actual value. This problem is going to be even worse when you ask about longer periods of time. So if we'd ask about the number of coffees you've had over the past year, the difference between the true number that you've actually drunk and the number that you report is likely to be even bigger. On the other hand, questions like how many electronic devices have you bought in the past year are subject to another type of memory bias. What happens here is that people remember what electronic devices they've bought recently and pack all of those into the period of 1 year, when in reality, some of those devices may have been purchased 13 months ago or even longer. This type of memory bias is called telescoping. The effect is that when this type of question is asked, so anything that occurs not very frequently but is not so major that people remember the exact date, is likely to be over-reported. The solution is to be as specific as possible when asking these questions and give the most amount of guidance. For example, you can ask about behavior over multiple time frames. Another good idea is giving assistance in remembering timing by providing clear reference points. For example, by asking, how many electronic devices have you purchased after Christmas, rather than over the past year or something similar. The same principle applies to reporting issues over longer time frames. Many individuals will have trouble remembering dates of events in the past, especially when you're dealing with an illiterate population. For example, people may not remember the exact dates of when they've moved or migrated, and may forget specific dates of death or births in the family. The solution here is to come up with a list of important events, like elections or other historical landmarks, that everybody's going to remember. You can sit down with your team of enumerators and come up with a list of such events, and then use these to help respondents more accurately report incidents in the past. Another source of bias in reporting occurs when income and assets are over-reported because people don't want to admit that they're poor, or they wish to come off as being more wealthy than they actually are. On the other hand, wealth might be underreported. In fact, this is the much more likely scenario when the organization who's administering the survey is also involved in distributing benefits, like PIN does. The reason is that respondents might think that reporting lower wealth will lead to more benefits for them or for their community. This can be really frustrating, and it occurs even when the team conducting the survey has absolutely no connection whatsoever to the distribution of benefits. And unfortunately, there's really no way to completely avoid this. It's just a fact of collecting data in developing countries. To mitigate the problem a little bit, what you can do is you can make clear that benefits will not be based on the answers that are given in the survey, if that's actually the case. This helps, although it's still not totally convincing for some subjects and the problem doesn't completely go away. Another thing you can do is to add cross-checks in the survey, and this can help to detect this issue of underreporting in order to get benefits. This means adding multiple questions that measure similar things and then comparing answers from the two. If the two measures don't seem to make sense together, then this is a clue that survey respondents are not giving very accurate information. When measuring income, for example, you might ask about occupation. This gives you an orientation point for income, and based on local knowledge, you can check to make sure the income stated makes sense for the occupation. And if it doesn't, you can even instruct the survey enumerators to go back and double check things like income and consumption. Obviously, sensitive information is a difficult thing to ask about on surveys. And this includes sexual behavior, drug and alcohol use, and other issues that might be taboo in a particular society. The first thing to remember is that if you have these questions on a survey, then training enumerators to ask about this information in a sensitive way is necessary if it's going to be included. Another method can be used to elicit this information without getting the respondents to directly admit to the behavior. This method involves randomly dividing the respondents into two groups. The first group is provided with a list of statements and then asked how many of the statements are true. The statements should be non-sensitive in nature, and they should be things that are likely to be true but won't necessarily be true. In other words, you want to get real variation in responses. Next, the second group is asked the exact same set of statements, but with the addition of another statement which contains the sensitive information. Then we can take the difference in the average number of true statements reported by the first group and subtract this from the number of true statements reported by the second group. Since the averages for both groups should be the same, because we randomize the groups, then the difference in the number reported of true statements should reflect the average of the sensitive information reported by the second group. This method works well when you have a large enough sample. It's advantageous because it allows you to gather information on sensitive topics without forcing respondents to directly reveal it. This ensures that the information is private and allows you to collect more accurate responses. While this method reveals the average incidence of the behavior or characteristic, what it doesn't do is allow you to learn about behavior from a specific individual, and this can be a disadvantage if you want to link the information with other personal characteristics.